This is the third part of Lab 2 of Unit 2 for the 3D Modelling and Animation module. So if I go to Flex Builder and I run the application in its previous state, then what we had was a man jumping around, and he's not moving. He was up in the top left-hand corner, and you'll notice he's now falling down more correctly. And so the only modification I have made to the file so far is that as we go around the initialization, I've set the bottom of the images all to 0. So they're all on the same base plane rather than being aligned to the top of the images. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this guy walk across the screen. And in order to do that, I'm going to introduce a new private variable, which is just going to be his position in terms of x. It's going to be an int, and I'm going to initialize it to 0. So I'm going to gradually increment this across in the enter frame function. So I'm just going to add on to this about 5 pixels at a time. I'm going to test to see when the position gets to the end of the screen by looking at it with respect to the, if I can type, the width. And if it is, then what I'm going to do is I'm obviously going to reset the character to the left side of the screen. And now all I have to do is take my character, which is char1, and I'm going to set the x value equal to my x position. And now if we run this, we should have a nice simple behavior walking across the screen. There we go. Alright, but the fall and the walk behaviors are still combined. And the way I'm going to separate these two behaviors is I'm going to use a couple of buttons, and I'm going to use a couple of separate on-frame event handlers. So I'm going to have one on-frame event handler for the walk, one on-frame event handler for the fall. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my couple of buttons, and the easiest way to do this is to do it in design mode. I'm going to make a little bit of space up here, and I'm going to add 2 buttons. The first one I'm going to call walk. The second one I'm going to call fall. I'm now go back into source mode, and you can see I've got my 2 buttons there. Of course, these are going to have event handlers associated with their clicks, and so I'm going to say on walk click is the name of the first one, and it's going to pass an event, and we're going to have a similar one for the fall. And of course, I'm going to have to declare both of these event handlers as private function. And here's our first one, which is on walk. And it's to be passed back an event, of course, which is going to be of type event. And it's going to return nothing, and there's the body of my code. I'll just get rid of that extra text there. I'm going to copy and paste this, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a similar one for on fall. Now when I save this, it should save correctly, and I don't have any errors in it at the moment. Alright, so these 2 click functions are going to be associated with 2 separate event handlers, which will handle each of the walking and falling behaviors. So I'm going to have 2 of these, which are going to be executed on entering the frame. One is going to do the walk, and one is going to do the fall. Now, to start off with, I'm going to test this by saying that, well, we're not going to have any behaviours until we actually press a button. And when we start the walk, of course, what we have to do is, the first thing we have to do is we have to add this event handler. Let's now see if we've got the man under program control, and we've actually got an error here, and this is saying that access to undefined property on enter frame, and that's because we haven't called this the right name. So what we have to do is we have to change that to the walk function, and now let's do it, and we should have a correctly running system. And of course the man is actually invisible at the moment, so we have to press the walk function, and there he's walking across the screen. We can also, of course, change the function so he only does the walk. So now what we're going to do is we're going to test to see whether he's greater or equal to 8, because that's when we start the fall. And what that will do now is it will give us a behaviour, the walk behaviour. There we go. And there's our man walking across the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video just now, and to make it reasonably small, but we've seen how we can create a function which controls the walking of the man. One of the other things I can do, just to show a demonstration here, is that in the onFall function, then the simplest way to stop the behavior is to remove the event handler. So now what I'm doing is, I'm removing the event listener, and if I compile this and run this now, then when we start the walk, when we hit fall, then this is simply removing the event handler and we're stopping the man. So we can start and we can stop simply by removing and adding the event handler. And that's the end of this part.